What's happening? A good Monday morning to all of you. Thanks for joining me as always. And we have so much to talk about, so much intel regarding the Patriots over the weekend. Lots of news and notes post-combine. But before we get to those notes, I want to welcome our first sponsor here with the Nick Cattle Show. That's right. Thanks to all of you continuing to build the traffic to this show, build the community. We have our very first bona fide sponsor. Today, we introduce to you First Class Glazing. Elevate your bathroom experience with First Class Glazing, where they specialize in luxurious bathroom renovations and bathtub glazing. First Class Glazing's expert craftsmen are dedicated to delivering top-tier results using premium materials and precise techniques to create a space that exudes sophistication and charm. If you're ready to transform your bathroom into a sanctuary, visit First Class Glazing online at firstclassglazing.com or give Jose a call at 617-849-0513. That's 617-849-0513. Experience the epitome of elegance with First Class Glazing. And check this out. For listeners, viewers of the Nick Cattle Show, mention this podcast and you can get a free estimate plus 10% off. So just mention this pod and you get a free estimate, 10% off. Support the pod in many ways, as all of you do. One way would be checking out First Class Glazing at firstclassglazing.com. All right, let's get into the free agency notes. Let's get into all of the notes post-combine, because there was a lot of information, a lot of intel that was sent out there to Patriots fans over the last couple of days. I remind you, there are a lot of smoke screens. And by the way, we're going to go an hour today. So this is a power hour edition of this podcast. So settle in. We have a lot to talk about. Lots of smoke screens. Lots of smoke screens at this time of year, trying to send teams in different paths, right? So we have to acknowledge that there are smoke screens, but not everything is a smoke screen, and some intel is actually worth it. So J.C. Jackson, he was cut over the weekend. We've talked about this. If the Patriots cut Jackson, they create an extra $13, $14 million in cap space. That's precisely what they decided to do. So they cut Jackson. Patriots have about $100 million in space. And the free agency plan seems to be starting to crystallize here for the Patriots. But let's start at wide receiver, because the big news this morning was Mike Evans. He has agreed to a 2-year contract extension with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's going to pay him $52 million, $35 million guaranteed. I'm not surprised by this. None of you should be surprised by this. It's one of the main reasons why I had Calvin Ridley as the number one target for the Patriots at wide receiver this offseason, because I had expected Mike Evans to sign. I had expected Michael Pittman to get franchise tagged or stay in Indianapolis, and I think we will see that over the next 24 hours or so. So this should not be a surprise that Mike Evans is going to remain in Tampa Bay. But here's the one thing that stood out to me regarding Evans this morning. Diana Rossini tweeted out, multiple teams had Evans on their free agent wide receiver board and were hoping to land him in free agency based on several team sources. Titans, Rams, Chiefs, Giants, Panthers, Falcons, Jaguars, and the New England Patriots. I think that's a great sign. And I not only think it's a great sign that the Patriots were going after Mike Evans, I also think it is indicative of a massive change here in New England with how this front office is going to approach certain things, namely offense. I know some people on Twitter were tweeting at me saying, oh, how does this show massive change? How in the world is this a massive change? This is massive change. Tell me the last time the Patriots were involved at any level with one of the top receivers on the market. You tell me. When's the last time we were looking at a bona fide number one wide receiver who was going to make tens of millions of guaranteed dollars? Tell me the last time the Patriots were involved discussing that kind of talent. As a matter of fact, let me take you back to last offseason when the prior regime wasn't willing to spend a couple of extra $1 million to bring in DeAndre Hopkins. This is a massive sea change. This front office is looking for talent. This front office understands that you need a legitimate number one wide receiver. to not only consistently produce offensively in the year 2024, but also to support your quarterback, especially if that quarterback is a young guy. So this is a massive change. There's no way, no how that Bill Belichick would be getting involved with conversations with the top 2 or 3 receivers on the market. It's just he does not appreciate spending money at that position. He'll spend up to a point. He'll bring in Nelson Aguilar. He'll make a trade for Devontae Parker. He'll trade for Randy Moss because it is such a cheap price to pay at that time. But honestly, when's the last time we heard the Patriots were involved in any way at any level discussing contract or targeting a top receiver on the free agency market? This is a huge change, and I think it tells us what Elliott Wolf, Gerard Mayo think about this offense and understand what they need to quote-unquote weaponize it. Now, of course, there's been a lot of talk about Baker Mayfield over the weekend. That's heating up. It kind of makes sense, right? If you were the Patriots, and we talked about this on the podcast last week, if you're the Patriots, would it make sense to bring in Baker Mayfield along with Mike Evans, right? A package deal. So you have your starting quarterback and you have your wide receiver 1. I would say the Patriots being interested in Mike Evans and all of the talk over the weekend about the Pats being interested in Baker Mayfield, we can look at both of those things as one. And now that Evans is staying in Tampa, I would expect Baker Mayfield to stay in Tampa as well. I'd be very surprised if the Buccaneers let Baker Mayfield walk, whether it's to Atlanta, whether it's to New England, whether it's to Minnesota. I find it very difficult to believe. And as a matter of fact, I would imagine that Mike Evans had the conversation, right? That he had the conversation with the Bucs, and he believes that Mayfield is going to return. I think that's why Evans signs on the dotted line. Get that deal done, get his numbers on the books, and then pivot and try to finalize a deal with Baker Mayfield. And we know that, Evans' agent over the weekend came out and said he doesn't want to play with a rookie quarterback. He wants a chance to win. He wants to play with somebody who's a bona fide veteran. So I think you look at this and you say to yourself, Evans staying in Tampa would likely lead you to believe that Baker will stay in Tampa as well. So I would expect over the next few days some news from Tampa regarding the quarterback situation. And I would not be surprised whatsoever by that news. Josh Gemini jumps in with a super chat. Again, you can send your super chats. Don't forget, you can jump to the front of the line with your question and your thought. Also, beyond that, you contribute to the program financially. So I appreciate it, Josh Gemini. Agents using Pats as leverage to boost offers. You could say that possibly, Josh, but here's the thing. As Diana Rossini said, there are a lot of teams in on Mike Evans. I don't think anybody needs to use the Patriots to boost an offer because there's going to be money out there to be spent. And we know where the wide receiver market is. So I think this is a case more of Mike Evans wanting to stay in Tampa, Tampa having the money to spend on Evans and trying to keep the good vibes going with the Buccaneers, with Baker and Mike Evans to try to keep that thing together. So we'll see if Baker does end up staying in Tampa, but that would be my guess. All right, let's move on as far as wide receiver options, the approach by the Patriots on what they're trying to do. Mass Live, Chris Mason, Karen Garigian, Mark Daniels wrote this over the weekend. Insiders in league circles expressed some doubt that a true number 1 receiver will be available to the Patriots in free agency. There's speculation that Michael Pittman and Calvin Ridley could stay with the respective teams. That would leave Marquise Hollywood Brown and Gabe Davis as the top available options. An intriguing name among NFL teams, the Patriots included, is Texans wide receiver Noah Brown. The 28-year-old had a couple explosive games in Houston last season, catching 6 passes for $153 against Tampa, followed it up with a 7-catch, 172-yard performance the next week. Here is Andrew Callahan, the latest on Kendrick Bourne. After months of stalled talks, the Patriots have offered Bourne a contract. He received his offer before the scouting combine when league sources told the Herald he should have strong interest if he hits free agency. According to a source, the Patriots initially approached Bourne about a possible extension shortly after he tore his ACL. Bourne visited the team facility 2 weeks ago for a checkup on his progress and met with team leadership. According to one source familiar with the wide receiver market, if the Pats do not re-sign Bourne, history indicates they might lose him to a division foe. 2 front office executives, one with the AFC, one in the NFC, projected Bourne will eventually sign a new contract with an average annual value around $7 million. It's unclear whether he will land a multi-year contract on a one-year deal forced upon injured players. Callahan mentioned the Jets, the Bills, the Texans, and even more teams being interested in Kendrick Bourne. So there's your update. And none of that should surprise us, especially as far as the top of the market wide receivers, as we've discussed. I think Calvin Ridley is the most reasonable target this offseason if you want to upgrade at that position and upgrade significantly. I still think Ridley could be available. Let's not forget, the Jacksonville Jaguars would have to trade a second-round pick to the Falcons for the Ridley acquisition if he signs an extension with the Jaguars. So if Jacksonville signs Ridley to a long-term deal, Ridley is going to cost the Jaguars a second-round pick. If he doesn't sign an extension with the Jaguars, it'll cost the Jaguars a third-round pick. So when you think of why Ridley might be available, you have to ask the question, do you think Jacksonville would be willing to give up a second-round pick or a third-round pick? A second-round pick and keep Ridley, or a third-round pick and let him walk? And the Jags could draft a wide receiver in round 1 or round 2 to replace Ridley. So I still think it's a possibility. I don't know if I'd say probability, but I do think it's a possibility that Calvin Ridley will be available via free agency because of the pick differential going back to that trade. All right, more thoughts coming up. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Give us that thumbs up. Every thumb counts. More thumbs means more eyeballs. We got our first sponsorship today officially, so that's cool, and it's because this podcast, this show is picking up steam, and we do that by liking and subscribing. Don't forget to subscribe. Trying to hit 2,250 subscribers by next week during free agency. Like and subscribe, rate and review. And I'll be launching a Patreon channel a week from today. I'll have more details about that Patreon coming up later. All right, so when you combine the prior reports and you look at this wide receiver position and what the Patriots might want to do, and you combine that with some of the offensive line news that we got over the past couple of days, which we will cover in a minute, it does make you wonder if the Patriots will just double dip at wide receiver if they don't sign a wide receiver in free agency. And we talked about this when I built my preseason offense going back a couple of weeks ago with my offseason free agency plan. And the idea was I would still sign Ridley and double dip in the draft. But if you don't sign Ridley, if you don't sign a number one, let's say you walk away with a Gabe Davis, or you walk away with Noah Brown. If you walk away with a wide receiver of that ilk, then I think the Patriots will absolutely double dip in the draft. But I still think they could double dip even if they sign Ridley. I mean, you could be looking at, Calvin Ridley and Ladd McConkey, for example. And then you draft another wide receiver in round 4. I don't think that is out of the realm of possibility. I could see the Patriots spend some money at wide receiver and draft a receiver or two. I don't think that's nuts. I don't think that's crazy by any means. So we'll keep our eye out on wide receiver. How about tight end? Because as we know, the Patriots, somebody reminded me that the Patriots do have a tight end on their roster for next year. And I want to give that person credit, but I don't remember their name. They said, you keep forgetting that the Patriots, they have a tight end on the roster, Nick. They have a tight end signed. And I apologize for my disrespect of LaMichael Petway. But yes, LaMichael Petway is technically on the roster. But we're talking about legitimate tight end talent, right? Somebody who you believe is a number one for this team. What's up with Hunter Henry? What's the latest on him? Well, we've got notes on that. Mass Live, Karen Gorigian, Chris Mason, Mark Daniels wrote this. While the Patriots would like to bring Henry back, the tight end is likely to hit free agency. The two sides are far apart on an extension. A name to watch for the Patriots could be Austin Hooper, who was with the Browns back in 2020 and 2021, overlapping with Van Pelt. Harrison Bryant also played for Van Pelt last season. Other notable free agents are Dalton Schultz and Noah Fant. Now, Jeremy Fowler of ESPN wrote about Schultz, and here's what he had to write about the tight end. Enough teams expect him to clear $10 million per year. New England is one to watch here potentially, as is a return to Houston. The Seahawks, Noah Fant will also do well. So, the latest on Hunter Henry. Patriots want him back. Looks like he's going to go out into free agency because he thinks he's going to make much more money, or at least more money, than the Patriots right now are willing to offer him to put on the table. So it looks like on March 4th, Henry is going to test free agency. If the Patriots decide not to bring Henry back, or he gets a better deal elsewhere, then we're looking at the possibility of Dalton Schultz. Maybe Noah Fant. I've mentioned Gerald Everett. Now, Schultz makes sense. He caught 59 footballs last year, 635 yards and 5 touchdowns with the Texans. And when you look at the possibility of Schultz or Fant or Hooper or Bryant or Gerald Everett, I honestly don't believe there's a significant gap between Hunter Henry and some of those other guys. So if you told me the Patriots were able to go out there and get Schultz on a deal that's close to Hunter Henry, I'm fine with it. I think Noah Fant has some potential in the right offense. So I don't think there's a huge difference. I'd be okay. I'd be okay with Fant. I'd be okay with Schultz. I want Hunter Henry back, but I'm not going to overpay Hunter Henry when there are other tight ends on the market that are pretty close to what he would give you. It just doesn't make sense, right? So Fant, Everett, Schultz, one of those guys. Hooper, Bryant as a tight end too. I'd rather have them as a tight end too. Don't sleep on Pharaoh Brown. There's been conversations about Pharaoh Brown possibly coming back. So the Patriots could easily see Pharaoh Brown as their tight end too and go out and spend the money on somebody like Schultz. And you walk into the season with Schultz, Pharaoh Brown, and Petway as your tight end rotation. So I would not overlook or forget Pharaoh Brown. Get a good, solid second tight end. Brown would fit the bill. I also would not overlook the idea of drafting a developmental tight end. All right, let's get to some of your chats. If I can jump in here, there's a lot of people commenting. I appreciate every single one of you. Nightshade says, congrats, a sponsor. Yeah, pretty cool. Always great to land that first sponsor when you're doing this thing all on your own. One-man band here. So it works out. Nightshade also says, how about Marvin and Baker? Again, I think Baker's going to stay in Tampa. That's my guess. Somewhat of an educated guess, given some of the stuff that we've read and what Mike Evans had to say about playing with a certain level of quarterback and the fact that Evans just re-signed with Tampa and they've got Kyle Trask on the roster. I don't think that Evans is signing that contract extension today if he thinks it's going to be Kyle Trask. I just don't see it. Operation Expedition. Let's go, bro. GM, I have a feeling we're going to land Justin Jefferson. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Minnesota wants to keep Jefferson. I think, the assets and the money for Jefferson, that would be a very, very hefty price. And I love Jefferson. But do you want to put that much investment into the wide receiver position? Not just money, but also assets to make a deal for somebody like Jefferson when you have so many other things you've got to figure out. You've got both tackles to figure out. You've got your quarterback to figure out. I just think it's right now in this kind of situation, in this specific situation that the Patriots are in, I think you'd have to give up too much for a Justin Jefferson, as much as I love him. As much as I love Jefferson, who is arguably the best receiver in the league. All right, don't forget, send a super chat. You can jump to the front of the line with your question or your comment. You also contribute financially to the program. I want to talk about the offensive line because a lot came out over the weekend about the offensive line, and I think we're starting to see what the Patriots envision, what they want up front, and what fits. So we'll get into the offensive line in a couple of minutes, but I do want to take a minute here. And look, I'm not going to try to do this too often, okay? But as you know, I'm a one-man band, and I'm not getting paid by corporate or any of that. I'm getting paid by YouTube, and it's not a ton of money, trust me when I tell you. I get paid by Spotify, and if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Pods, rate and review. But I need to find different sources of income. because I've been unemployed for a few months after moving back home due to family reasons. So I'll get to the Pats coming up, but I do want to share with you and give you some details on a Patreon page. I'll be launching a Patreon page a week from today, okay? March 11th, Patreon. It's happening. Exclusive content. And here's what you'll get to start off. And we can always add as we go along. But on the Patreon page, you'll get a weekly ad-free podcast. Bonus pod, ad-free. That'll be happening once a week. You also get a mailbag where we can interact more with your specific questions, your specific comments about life, about sports. We'll be doing a weekly mailbag. And here's something really cool that we're going to do on this Patreon. We are going to do a hangout/Q&A once every 2 weeks, so twice a month. So we'll have a bi-weekly hangout Q&A. We can talk about life. We can talk about media. We can talk about sports. I'll pop on and we'll just shoot the ish for about a half hour, 45 minutes. So exclusive content to members of the Patreon. The Patreon launches a week from today, $5 a month. That's it. $5 a month. What is that? $1.25 a week or so? $5 a month. And here is the address. And I'm also going to put it down into the description box as well on YouTube. Patreon.com/Nick Cattles. So patreon.com/Nick Cattles. Feel free to join today. Patreon.com/Nick Cattles. $5 a month. You'll get a weekly bonus podcast ad-free. You'll get a mailbag as well. And you will get a hangout/Q&A with me, live video style, at least twice a month. So check it out. I appreciate every single one of you that continue to help build this channel. Like, subscribe, rate, and review. All right, let's get into the offensive line now. Done with that spiel. This offensive line is going to be very interesting. And we've got some reports. But before I get to that, I got to give Josh a shout out. Love the show. Keep it coming. $50 super chat. I mean, that is a banger. Thank you, Josh. Means the world to me, man. If you have a comment, feel free to leave a comment or a question. But a super chat, $50 super chat. Thank you. I mean, Josh, $50. That's 10 months of the Patreon page, right? But I appreciate Josh with that super chat, man. Wow. I'm just knocked over by that. Thank you for loving the show and supporting the show. All right. Back to the O-line. Can't say enough about Josh again. Doug Kyde, Andrew Callahan, Boston Herald, over the weekend, writing about Mike Onwenu. He's expected to become the Patriots' highest paid free agent this month. Whether he stays in New England remains to be seen, though two league sources said Onwenu has not been spotted in the building this offseason nearly as often as Kyle Duggar or select veterans, including Juju Smith-Schuster. So interesting. Very interesting, right? Onwenu has not been in the building as often as some other guys. Doesn't mean he's not going to re-sign. Doesn't mean he's not going to stay. It's just interesting. It's an interesting tidbit. And it remains to be seen if he stays. Now, Jeremy Fowler wrote about the offensive guard market. Here's what Fowler wrote, ESPN.com. Insider article. Good money will be spent on guards this offseason. So many teams need them and have targeted the position. Don't be surprised if the top of the group commands $16 million or more. So, offensive guard is going to be very pricey. We usually think of guards, we think of less money, right? Interior offensive line, the tackles get paid the money. Well, Jeremy Fowler's saying, not this offseason. This free agency, this offseason, guards are going to make a ton of bank. And Mike Onwenu is obviously one of the guys at the very tippity top of that market. So now you understand why Onwenu might want to test free agency. Because the tea leaves are telling him that there's going to be a lot of money spent at his position this offseason. Phil Perry wrote about the franchise tag, says it's his understanding that the tag has not yet been ruled out as a means for keeping either Onwenu or Duggar. So the Patriots are keeping their options open. However, retaining Onwenu is not the only offensive line priority. Ian Rappaport reported over the weekend that Tyron Smith of the Dallas Cowboys is unlikely to stay in Dallas. Todd Archer of ESPN wrote this about Smith. He's unlikely to return after initial discussions left sides at different ends of the salary spectrum. While Smith played 14 games in 2023, he has not played a full season since 2015. Serious neck, back, hamstring, and elbow injuries. But Smith last year got together with the team and they figured out a different kind of plan. And that plan was they started to limit the contact on Smith during practice weeks. And we see a lot of this around the league, especially for guys that are a little bit older. Last year, Smith was named a second-team All-Pro. He had an 89% pass block win rate and almost a 79% run block win rate. He's going to be 34 years old in December. Now, why are we talking about Tyron Smith? Because here's what Mass Live, Karen Guregian, Chris Mason, and Mark Daniels, here's what they wrote about Smith. The Patriots would like to find a starting caliber tackle in free agency. One name to watch is Smith. The 33-year-old would provide a short-term solution at left tackle, and the Patriots are expected to pursue Smith when free agency opens. So there you have it, right there in black and white. Karen Guregian, Mark Daniels, Chris Mason telling us the Patriots want to go out in free agency and find a starting caliber tackle. And Smith, Tyron Smith, is one of those guys that's on their list. They are expected to pursue him as soon as free agency begins, which tells me he is one of the top priorities for this front office. Mass Live continued to write, this is not a deep tackle class in free agency. The next best option would be Cincinnati's Jonah Williams. He's somebody that we've talked about, right? Patriots will also be heavily interested in drafting a tackle, and new offensive line coach Scott Peters arrived in Indianapolis on Wednesday night to scout prospects. Even more on the offensive line from Mass Live. The Patriots are planning for the possibility that Cole Strange will not be ready for part of the offseason. Because of that, they're looking into adding more depth at the position. Sidy Sow is the presumed starter at right guard. A lot of interesting things here. Lots to digest as far as the offensive line and what the Patriots are planning on doing. So let's put all of this together, shall we? Don't forget to give us that thumbs up, like, and subscribe, rate, and review. Means the world to me, means the world to this podcast and this community as we continue to build this family here on the Nick Cattle Show. The timing of these Smith reports, I do not think this is a coincidence. I do not. Let's think about this, okay? So up until the combine, pretty much everybody is saying that Smith is likely to stay in Dallas. Then you have combine week. And as we discussed leading into combine week and we discussed during last week, the combine is when you got the agents talking. Lots of gums are flapping, right? Lots of drinking is happening. Loose lips, conversations. And so you've got the combine week. And at the end of the combine week, Ian Rappaport tells us that Smith all of a sudden is unlikely to return in Dallas. Then you've got the report from ESPN and Todd Archer saying that, Smith and the Cowboys are on different ends of the spectrum salary-wise. Here's what I'm thinking. I don't know if it's the Patriots, but it certainly seems, if you're going off of these reports, and again, don't forget, a lot of smoke screens out there right now. This could be a smoke screen for Smith to try to make more money from Dallas. But if we were to believe these reports, it seems obvious to me that a team had a conversation with Smith's agent, and Smith's agent learned how much money he could make walking into free agency. And so at that time, the conversations between Dallas and Smith likely changed, right? I'll give you a hypothetical. Let's say it is the Patriots. Let's say it is Elliott Wolf. The current contract projections for Tyron Smith, Spotrac has it 1 year, $7.5 million. A to Z Sports has it 2 years, $25 million. Pro Football Focus has it 1 year, $10 million. So let's just throw this hypothetical out there. Since the postseason, Smith was likely, quote unquote, to return to the Cowboys. Combine week starts. Conversations happen. Let's say Elliott Wolf talks to Tyron Smith's agent and says, "Yeah, what do you think it'll take to steal Smith from Dallas?" And Elliott Wolf or somebody else in the Patriots front office gets a good idea as to how much the Cowboys want to spend on Smith. Well, that person from the front office of the Patriots could say back to the agent, "Oh, we value him much higher than that." You don't have to get into specific numbers, but the crumbs are dropped. And so then the agent knows that he can play hardball against Dallas, and Dallas says, "Okay, we're done. This isn't going to work." So I think that is a likely scenario. Again, it might not be just the Patriots, but it seems to me that Smith's agent got word he's going to make much more money than Dallas was willing to pay him. And so he's going to walk into free agency. And this might be a deal that gets done quickly. Because if you jump over the top of Dallas and you offer that kind of contract, let's say the Patriots ended up signing Smith, 2 years, $24 million, $12 million a year, okay? A lot of that in bonus money, keep the cap number down. If you do that as the Patriots, I think it's a very reasonable approach because it's not going to cost you a ton of money. It's not going to be a long-term deal. And you just signed a second-team all-pro left tackle. And you can cover yourself by drafting a tackle prospect, third, fourth round, somebody you can develop. Hopefully Calvin Anderson is over his sickness and he can be your swing tackle. Or maybe you go out and you sign a cheaper swing tackle. But if you told me that the Patriots ended up with Tyron Smith as their left tackle, I'd be completely fine with that because I don't think it's going to cost you a ton of money and it's not going to be a deal longer than 2 years. So I'm fine with it. Give me that 2-year window with Smith, solid to really, really good left tackle. Give me a 2-year deal with him, and then I get to develop the next left tackle under Smith. You don't need to sign a left tackle for 5 years, 6 years, $100 million. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And if Smith ends up pricing himself out, then yes, I would look at Jonah Williams. It all depends on the money. But I think, going out and signing Smith to that short-term contract to stabilize your offensive line on the left side, I think you're cooking. And let's not forget, everything has a domino effect. Every decision this offseason creates a domino effect. So what would signing Smith mean for the Patriots for other positions? This is when we think a little bit deeper, right? This is when we dig in a little bit more here on the Nick Cattle Show. So what would it mean? Well, now if you sign Smith, you're not necessarily having the same kind of urgency to draft an offensive tackle, at least not in the first or second round, right? If you sign Smith, let's say you sign Smith and you retain Mike Onwenu. Now you're not desperate to address tackle at 3 or 34. This is why it makes sense. You've got to put all the pieces together. And a lot of times people fall victim of just focusing on the vacuum, right? On the one decision. But every decision you make impacts another decision. And what you've got to do is you've got to put this puzzle together, right? And so you need both tackle spots. You need at least 2 wide receivers. You need a quarterback. And you have certain avenues to fill those positions. You've got money, tons of cap space. You've got the picks. So if you sign Tyron Smith to a 2-year deal, say $24 million, $25 million, and you retain Mike Onwenu on a long-term contract, now you can use the 3rd pick, the 34th pick, the 68th pick. You can use those picks on other positions and not be desperate to use those picks on a tackle. So let's just throw this out there. And this is just simply and purely a hypothetical. You sign Smith, you retain Onwenu. Now what you can do is you can draft your quarterback at 3. You could draft your wide receiver at 34. And if you want to get selfish at wide receiver, you could actually draft quarterback at 3 and then go receiver at 34, receiver at 68. And now all of a sudden you've got your 2 tackles and you've got 2, hopefully, fingers crossed, 2 young stud receivers. You could do that. And then you could say, I'll draft a tackle. I'll draft a tackle either in the 3rd round. I'll draft a tackle in the 4th round. I'll draft somebody who I think is a year or 2 away from being a legitimate starting tackle, but I have that year or 2 to develop that guy under Smith, under Onwenu. Again, that's only one pathway. My point is, if you're spending the money at tackle, if you're going to spend some money on Jonah Williams and you're going to spend money on retaining Mike Onwenu, then that opens up the opportunity to utilize those picks at other positions. So you could sign the tackle in free agency. You could retain Onwenu, and then you can say, we're going to spend a pick or 2 on tackle, but we're going to wait until the 3rd or 4th round, and that way we can get 2 of the top 35 picks at quarterback and receiver. Again, that's only one option. It's only one option that you can take. But it's an option if you sign Tyron Smith or Jonah Williams and retain Onwenu. You open up that opportunity. If you sign Smith and Onwenu, I don't think you're drafting a tackle very high, because now you're using too many of your top assets to acquire one position. You don't want to spend money. You don't want to spend money on tackle and then go in and use a top pick on a tackle. It's too much. Too much investment in that position. And unfortunately, the Patriots have so many holes to fill offensively, you can't invest too much in one position. The other thing that jumped out at me from that Mass Live story was Sidy Sow. Sidy Sow is the presumed starter at right guard. Interesting, right? Interesting. So here's, again, the tackle conversation. Peter Jacoby says you need 2 tackles. Peter, as usually the case, hopefully, that I make on a daily basis with the podcast, just give it a minute or 2 and we'll get there. So you need 2 tackles. Yes. If Mass Live is telling us that the Patriots want to chase a tackle in free agency and that Tyron Smith is one of the guys they're going to go after hard when free agency begins, that would leave you with right tackle. Smith is your left tackle. So who's going to play right tackle? Now, there's been this conversation about Mike Onwenu. Is Mike Onwenu a right tackle or is he a guard, right? Guard or tackle, tackle or guard. Some people who watch the film will tell you he's good enough to play tackle. Other people will tell you that he's not good enough to consistently play tackle. One of those people is Evan Lazar. Evan has been saying he does not believe Onwenu is a full-time tackle. Right? But other people would say they disagree with that. If Sidy Sow is the presumed right guard, then who is your presumed right tackle? It's got to be Mike Onwenu, right? We've consistently heard since the season has ended, the Patriots want Onwenu back. Wolf wants him. Mayo wants him. Well, if they want Onwenu back, and we're being told that Sidy Sow is the presumed starting right guard, then Onwenu's not coming back to play right guard, is he? He's coming back to play right tackle. So if you sign Smith or Williams and you retain Onwenu and the Patriots see Onwenu as a tackle, now you have Smith/Williams on the left side, Onwenu on the right side. Those are your starting tackles when you put the pieces together. So the offensive line plan, if you're the Patriots, the perfect scenario I think they're looking at, if you asked Elliot Wolf, what is the perfect scenario? Gathered from all of these reports, again, smoke screens exist. But if you were looking at the offensive line, Elliot Wolf and Gerard Mayo want to put on the field week 1, dependent on Cole Strange's health, the offensive line that I think they want to put out there would be Tyron Smith or Jonah Williams, left tackle, Strange, left guard, David Andrews, center, Sidy Sow, right guard, and Onwenu, your right tackle. So Smith, Strange, Andrews, Sow, Onwenu. I think that's what they want to do. Don't forget, give us that like, thumbs up. More thumbs means more eyeballs. Got a bunch of people watching as we talk Patriots here. Don't forget to give us that like, that thumbs up. It takes a second of your time. It means the world to us. So don't forget to give us that like and subscribe. Trying to hit 2,250 subscriptions by next week for free agency. Trying to get to 2,250. You can help us meet that mark by subscribing and also get notified. So like, subscribe, rate, and review. I talked about the Patreon page earlier. You can go back and listen to it here on the pod, but I'm starting a Patreon page as well a week from today, March 11th, $5 a month. You're going to get exclusive content that you don't get here. It's not going to change this podcast, but you'll get exclusive content on top of this daily podcast. We will do a weekly, once a week, ad-free pod. We'll do that for you. We're also going to have a mailbag that we can talk about life, craft beer, sports, dogs, whatever. We'll have a mailbag every week, and we're also going to do a bi-weekly hangout/Q&A with all of the members of the Patreon, just to hang out and shoot the crap, shoot the poop. So if you're interested in that exclusive content, patreon.com/Nick Cattles, NickCattles, $5 a month, $1.25 a week for exclusive content from yours truly. Appreciate every single one of you. All right, we're not done yet. Told you there's a lot to talk about. Something else jumped out at me over the weekend about the Patriots in their free agency plan. And this was very fascinating. Doug Kyed, Andrew Callahan, Boston Herald. They wrote this. The Patriots are targeting at least one elite defender who would start immediately. So, elite. I know a lot of people throw the word elite around. I don't like throwing the word elite around. I think there are only a select few elite talents at each position in the NFL. So if you say elite, that means this person has to be an impact, holy-ish, can't believe we just signed that dude kind of guy. That's what I'm thinking. So the Patriots are targeting at least one. Might be more than one, but they're targeting at least one elite defender in free agency who would start immediately. So let's play the game, shall we? What are your needs on defense? Edge, opposite of Matthew Judon. Maybe both edge spots. Get to that in a minute. Linebacker could be a sneaky need because you've got Judon and you've got Tavai both on the last year of their deals. Mack Wilson, of course, is also a free agent. So you could argue that linebacker is something that they need on this team. So who makes sense? We only want to look at the elite. I'm not looking at every name. Okay? We only want to look at elite because that's the word that Kyed and Callahan used in the Herald report. Let's look at edge. Many would say Josh Allen. Not Buffalo's Josh Allen, right? Jacksonville's Josh Allen. Well, Josh Allen is reportedly going to get franchise tagged. So I think you can take him off the list. Many would say Brian Burns. Brian Burns looks like he is going to be franchise tagged by Carolina, so I think you can take him off the list. So it's likely that Allen and Burns will be off the list because of the tag. If you're looking at edge, you could be looking at Danielle Hunter. It doesn't seem like Minnesota is going to tag him. They're invested in Justin Jefferson and, of course, Kirk Cousins. If they don't get Cousins, they're going to have to go out there and get a quarterback. So I think Danielle Hunter, if you're looking at edge players, Danielle Hunter makes the most sense. Dude is a stud. 70-plus pressures last year, 16.5 sacks. Danielle Hunter is an elite pass rusher. Danielle Hunter would be an elite defender that would start immediately for the Patriots at a position of need. So I would keep an eye out for Danielle Hunter. Now, does that mean you'll have Hunter and Judon? I don't know. Because Judon could get dealt. Judon could get traded. He wants more money. He's in the final year of his contract. And the Patriots obviously have two options. They could either bump Judon and keep him here, like they did last year. They could extend Judon, which I don't know if they would do or not because he's in his 30s. Or they just keep him, hope that he plays ball. I don't see that happening after last year, right? He wanted a bump last year. Or you trade him. So would Hunter replace Judon? I don't know. Would Hunter go with Judon? I have no idea. But I think if you've got Judon and Hunter, holy crap, what a pass rush. Devastating with Christian Barmore in the middle. So keep an eye on Hunter. How about interior defensive line? Lawrence Guy was cut. Could we be talking about a defensive tackle? Christian Wilkins, latest on him from Jeremy Fowler of ESPN. While Miami's stance is that all options are on the table for defensive tackle Wilkins, several league sources say he probably won't be franchise tagged. Christian Wilkins. Could he be a guy? Does Christian Wilkins make sense? Justin Matabuke, he's going to get tagged by Baltimore. He's either signing an extension or getting tagged. So if you're looking at interior defensive line, I think Christian Wilkins is the guy that you would bring up. Here's my question, though, about signing somebody like Wilkins. Would it be a good idea? And would the Patriots be willing to spend, let's say, $35 million a year on the interior defensive line? Because if you sign Wilkins, I can guarantee you that Christian Barmore is going to want a big fat contract extension. And by the way, he deserves it. I wrote about that at Boston Sports Journal. You can check it out, bostonsportsjournal.com, my latest column from Friday. I talked about Barmore and an extension. If you extend Christian Barmore and you give him a big payday, and on top of that, you sign Christian Wilkins to a huge contract deal, now you're spending a lot of money for the interior of that defensive line. And I would rather go with an edge player versus an inside player. If I'm going to spend that kind of money, I would extend Barmore. I would go out and sign Danielle Hunter if that's what you want to do. And I would have Hunter and Judon on the edges and Barmore in the middle. Another argument you could make is cornerback. Look, Christian Gonzalez is fantastic. He stays healthy. I think all of us expect him to be a number one corner. But corner is a sneaky need for the Patriots. Jonathan Jones is getting older. He's better playing inside and I think on the back end at this point in his career. You don't really have a ton of depth. You just cut J.C. Jackson. Alex Austin is an interesting name for an outside corner, but he still has to kind of grow. So cornerback could be interesting. Elite corners. Jalen Johnson. I think he's likely tagged by Chicago. L'Jarius Sneed is a very interesting name. Do the Patriots look at somebody like Sneed and say, oh, well, what if we go out there and we get a Sneed and you have Sneed and Gonzalez? My goodness. That's similar to like a Judon Danielle Hunter combination, but instead at cornerback and not edge. The thing with Sneed, though, is he's going to cost you a lot of money and he's also going to cost you assets. You would have to trade for him. So out of all of those names, I honestly feel like Danielle Hunter makes the most sense. Again, Doug Hyde, Andrew Callahan reporting that the Patriots are going to target at least one elite defender who would start immediately. Out of the names we just went through, I think Hunter makes the most sense. Like, subscribe, rate, and review. Don't forget to continue to support this show. And we got the Patreon page starting a week from today. If you want details on that and you're just jumping in, you can go back a few minutes and listen to those on the podcast. But the likes mean the world, whether you're on Facebook, Twitter/X, or YouTube. More thumbs up means more eyeballs. Always appreciate it. Like and subscribe. Trying to hit 2250 for subscriptions. Roll Pat says, City So, David Andrews, Antonio Maffi all struggled. City So got better as the year went on. Looked like he is a solid option to play guard. I would be okay with So. The idea of him being your starting right guard, I'd be okay with that. If you're moving a one to tackle, I think you could do much worse than City So. He might take a little bit more time to develop, but I thought he played well as the year went on. David Andrews, off and on, really good for a big chunk of the beginning of the season. Tailed off a little bit here and there. Obviously long in the tooth, but I think Andrews is still a good and sometimes really good center in the league. So I'm fine with him. Maffi struggled. I think Maffi is a project. Let's not forget, Maffi was originally a defensive lineman, right? He was on the defensive side. So he's still trying to figure out offensive line. He didn't play a ton in college on the O-line. Now, it's just whether or not he is, able to form into something worthwhile. Patriots loco, if you have a tackle and he mostly can't play, do you have a tackle? You got to be confident in his medicals. And I think he's talking about Tyron Smith. And yes, that's one of the questions, right? Smith has had a lot of injuries over his time. He has not played a full season since, what was it, 2015? Yeah, since 2015. But he did play 14 games last year and was a second-team All-Pro. So, good with the bad. Very interesting. Lots of notes about the Patriots over the weekend. Tons of notes. And some even more notes that we didn't get to. I mean, there's so much information pouring out right now. But we talked about wide receiver. We talked about offensive line. We talked about an elite defender. Now, before I bid you adieu today, special 1-hour edition of the podcast because we had so much to cover, I have to give love to the Celtics. Beating the Warriors by 52 without Kristaps Porzingis is outrageous. And I know, it's one game. And I know some of it was an anomaly, being hot early in the game, shooting threes. I understand all that. I understand that Steph Curry might have been a little banged up. Klay Thompson got banged up. They didn't have Andrew Wiggins. I don't care. Beating any NBA team by 50 points or more is outrageous. And the Celtics have done it 3 times this year, which is wild. To win that game by 52 without Porzingis, 48-12 on the season. And if you're into the Celtics, again, I wrote a column at Boston Sports Journal last week getting into this idea of, they only win when they make threes. That's not true. You can check out my column, Boston Sports Journal. But I thought yesterday what stood out to me, because everybody's paying attention to the points and everybody's talking about Jaylen Brown, which we'll get to in a minute. The defensive intensity from them yesterday, from the beginning through the third quarter, was just tremendous. Defensive intensity, nonstop ball pressure. You want to talk about impacting the basketball? They were impacting the basketball constantly. They were physical. They had a higher point of attack, pickup points near half court. They were pestering Steph Curry. I mean, their defense, you go back. Everybody got wrapped up in the offense. You go back and watch that game yesterday, okay? Go back and watch just defensively. Fast forward and get to the defensive possessions. The Celtics were on a string. Intense, smart, urgent, physical, impacting the ball from beginning to the third quarter. When this team plays that kind of defense, they're so tough to beat. Jason Tatum, last 2 games. Let's talk about him for a minute. His playmaking ability, his vision, he has taken the next step with the basketball in his hands. And what you saw on Friday night and yesterday, very similar. Tatum, when he gets doubled early, if you're going to try to take Tatum out of the game early, he's going to allow you to do that. He's going to embrace the double team, and he's going to find teammates for open shots. We saw it on Friday night. When Tatum was getting doubled by Dallas, he just finding teammates through the first half. Just finding teammates through the first half. Then the third quarter, I'll just go out there and drop 16 on your face. Same thing yesterday with the Warriors, right? He scored, 2 points in the first quarter? Defensively, they were trying to take Tatum out. Defensively, they were focused on JT. JT took advantage of that. Got other guys involved. Jaylen Brown had a fantastic first quarter. And then when JB sits down, what's Tatum do in the second quarter? All he does is drop 20. Tatum's understanding of the game. Remember when Tom Brady said, after so many years, I feel like I have the answers to the test? When you watch Tatum offensively, and yes, I still get upset with some of the pull-up threes and the contested threes that he takes. He's still obsessed with some of that. But when you watch Tatum, he looks like a guy who has the answers to the test. He understands what defenses are trying to do. He understands doubles. He understands where he has to go when he gets doubled. He doesn't get himself stuck in too many bad situations with the basketball anymore. And you see that. You see that growth within his game, the maturity, decision-making maturity, playmaking maturity. And him reading the game early on and allowing other guys to get involved. And then when he's needed to be able to just drop 16 or 20 in a quarter. Or to just get aggressive and shut the game down like he did against Philadelphia. Time to get aggressive. Time to get going. Precisely what he does. Shuts the door. Good night. Philly makes a run. They get within 2 in the fourth quarter. Tatum says, game over. Reminds me of Paul Pierce. When Paul Pierce said back in the day, I give the game what it needs. And Jason Tatum right now just turned 26 yesterday. Jason Tatum right now is giving the game what it needs more than ever. And if you're a Celtics fan, I hope you appreciate that. I hope you appreciate how much he is growing and developing and what he is becoming. Jaylen Brown's first quarter explosion. Warriors have no idea what you're doing. Left him wide open. Left him wide open. A lot of people will talk about that. Brown did his job. He knocked down open shots. JB's been tremendous since the All-Star break, shooting the lights out. He's been great. Another thing about JB, again, we get wrapped up in offense all the time. Watch Brown's defense in that game yesterday. There were 3, 4, 5 possessions against Steph Curry where Jaylen Brown was working Steph, was physical against him, was sticking to him against the dribble. Go back and watch Brown defensively yesterday. You might be surprised how good he was. Starters outscored Golden State 17-10 to start the third quarter. That's a good sign. They walked out there with a huge lead. They stayed focused. They had their intensity. And they won the first few minutes of that third quarter, which allowed Joe Mazzulla to sit the starters. Xavier Tillman's minutes, he played well on Friday. Defense, rebounding, his passing ability. He even knocked down a 3 yesterday. And the Celtics will play at Cleveland tomorrow night. One last note before I get to some of your chats. One last note on the Celtics, okay? Just to really understand and appreciate this 11-game winning streak. This was from Sports Info 247 last night on Twitter/X. The largest point differential over any 11-game stretch in NBA history. Celtics are number 1. They are a plus 243 during this 11-game stretch, which is better than the Bucks in 1971. Bucks had a plus 236, plus 231, and a plus 230. Inevitably, it's going to matter what happens in the postseason. And yes, it is championship or bust for this basketball team. But it does not mean that we should overlook or underappreciate what we are watching. We are literally watching one of the best regular season teams in NBA history. Up to this point, this is one of the best Celtics teams that has ever been put together. When you look at it analytically, statistically, all of it, record-wise, this right now is one of the best teams that we have ever been able to witness. And we should not overlook that. We can understand that the championship is the goal, and that's what matters most. We can do that and appreciate what's going on right now with this team because they are out of their minds good. All right, couple of chats here before we go. Get Flacco. Sounds like the Patriots might not be as high on Flacco. At least some people in the building might not necessarily be in love with the idea of Flacco. But look, I don't think Flacco is a terrible idea. He played well at the end of last year with Alex Van Pelt, obviously, in Cleveland. He's a fit at that position for this offense. I would be looking at Jacoby Brissett. I might look to go a little bit younger, but I think you could do worse than Joe Flacco. But it sounds like they might be more apt to sign Brissett or Gardner Minshew. Maryland, they have to sign Big Mike O. They have to. They want to. They want to. It sounds like they want to spend. They want to spend on Onwenu. They understand the importance of him. Josh Gemini jumped in, said Daniil Hunter. Yeah, if we're talking about elite defenders, that would immediately start. And according to Doug Codd and Andrew Callahan, Patriots are looking at an elite defender. They are targeting at least one elite defender on the market. And we went through some of the names, and Hunter makes a lot of sense to me. A lot of sense. All right, so that'll do it today. Don't forget to give us that thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Every thumb means more eyeballs, which means the world to us. That's how we beat the YouTube algorithm. So give us that thumbs up. Takes a second. Thumbs up, subscribe. Trying to hit 2250 subscriptions by next week during free agency. Let's see if we can do it. So like, subscribe, rate, and review. And also, patreon.com/Nick Cattles, $5 a month for exclusive content, You can check it out. Go to patreon.com/Nick Cattles. I can't even say my name. It's been an hour straight talking. Patreon.com/Nick Cattles. $5 a month, exclusive content for all of you just trying to survive and do my thing. So everybody who signs up for that, I appreciate you. We'll give you that exclusive content starting a week from today. And as always, be well, be healthy, be safe. We're back tomorrow unless some big news breaks at 11 a.m. sharp right here on YouTube. Until then, it's the Nick Cattles